Senator Wilson. Honourable Senators, I rise today as sponsor of Bill S-4, an act to amend the Energy Efficiency Act. Dear colleagues, the bill before us arrives at a key moment for Canadian consumers. At a time when price increases are spreading to all sectors and the historical stability of certain international trade relationships is being shaken, Bill S-4 is a step in the right direction by improving affordability for Canadian businesses and consumers through energy savings. Furthermore, given the unprecedented technological advances made since the Energy Efficiency Act was passed in the early 1990s, this bill represents a necessary modernization of our energy efficiency standards and procedures. Not only will this modernization result in savings for consumers and businesses, but it will also contribute to Canada's climate action.
This bill S-4. I would like to share a personal reflection and provide some insight as to why I'm pleased to sponsor this legislation. Colleagues, in my previous life on the executive of the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, we led a lot of work to reduce environmental impacts from port operations and development. One such initiative that our team developed and led was called the Energy Action Program. Through this program, which was partly sponsored by BC Hydro, we worked with tenants and terminal operators to identify opportunities for reducing energy consumption. The impact of this work significantly reduced energy usage and produced substantial cost savings for businesses in the port community. In total, to date, the program has reduced 135 gigawatt hours of electricity annually, which is the equivalent of taking 15,500 homes off the grid. Through this work, I saw firsthand the transformative power of energy innovation in protecting our environment and helping the bottom line of businesses. Carrying those lessons with me into the Senate chamber, I approached Bill S-4, an act to amend the Energy Efficiency Act, with the knowledge that modern energy efficiency standards are integral to energy security, to climate progress, and to prosperity of our communities, businesses and households alike. Honourable Senators, to better understand the need for the legislation before us, it is important that we understand the history and value of the current version of the Energy Efficiency Act. This Act was originally passed in 1992, but we live in a vastly different world today than we did more than 3 decades ago. Back in 1992, when this Act came into existence, CDs had just overtaken cassettes and vinyl as the most popular way to listen to music. It was also the year of the first text message, and most of us had never even dreamed of making an online purchase. When it was adopted, the Energy Efficiency Act was visionary for its time. It established a federal foundation for strong energy efficiency regulations, enabling us to set minimum standards for residential, commercial, and industrial products. This act represented nothing short of a great national achievement and a legislative success story. From 1995 to 2024, measured in 2023 dollars, these regulations delivered over $110 billion in savings for Canadian families, businesses, and industries. They have also resulted in energy savings equivalent to powering every single household in Canada, which represents approximately 16 million households, for 4 entire years. At the same time, the energy savings directly attributed to the Energy Efficiency Act translated into the avoidance of more than 770 megatons of greenhouse gas emissions. In easily digestible terms, this would be the equivalent of taking all passenger vehicles in Canada off the road for a staggering 12 years. Yet, when this act was created, machines like appliances were simpler, built for a single purpose. Our regulations didn't have to evolve quickly because technological achievements moved at a much slower pace. The smart, connected devices we take for granted today existed only in science fiction like Star Trek and the Jetsons. Where bricks and mortar once reigned supreme, billions of dollars of commerce now flow through online platforms with products crisscrossing borders at ever-increasing rates. Innovations such as smart thermostats, AI-equipped industrial systems, and appliances that draw information from the grid to make efficiency decisions are becoming commonplace. These things are no longer the exception, but the norm. By modernizing this Act, it will help us to better leverage the power of these products to increase our energy security. The amendments are also designed to help future-proof the Act so that Canada can operate with the tools not only required today, but those that will help us to respond to the unforeseen challenges of tomorrow. Honourable Senators, energy efficiency remains one of our most strategic, relevant, and powerful tools for tackling affordability for individual Canadians and businesses alike. This approach has proven to lower energy bills, strengthen our electricity grid, reduce emissions, and fortify our economy. The International Energy Agency calls energy efficiency the first fuel in clean energy transitions because it is one of the quickest and most inexpensive ways to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, while lowering energy bills and strengthening energy security. To be effective, though, our laws must keep pace with the changing context of energy use. Of equal importance, we must modernize because affordability is more important than ever. In an era of inflation, global economic trade uncertainty, and rising economic costs, every dollar saved on energy is a dollar that can be spent elsewhere on our families, communities, and on our aspirations. Colleagues, without the advancements this bill represents, we will allow our regulatory frameworks to lag. This stagnation will reinforce or create loopholes, inefficiencies, and unnecessary burdens. Challenges with online sales, outdated standards, and slow regulatory sales or response would erode progress and leave Canadians and their wallets exposed. Alternatively, we can seize the opportunity that Bill S-4 represents in reimagining the Energy Efficiency Act with a focus on improving affordability, powering innovation, and slashing red tape. The amendments presented in Bill S-4 fall into four broad groups, each serving to strengthen both our economy and our climate action. The first group of amendments are designed to enable a range of regulatory and non-regulatory tools, three of which I'm going to highlight. First, the bill would cut red tape by allowing qualifying industries to demonstrate the real-life marketplace impacts of new products or services under a temporary set of rules and regulatory supervision. This is a critical piece of the legislation in support of industry, as these amendments feature the ability of the minister to provide exemptions from the application of any provision of the Act. This exemption can be for up to 3 years, with a possible 3-year term extension, and allows for the testing of new products or ideas to stimulate innovation, competitiveness, or economic growth. These so-called sandboxes allow a large amount of flexibility to both businesses and industry to support their continued innovation. They do so by allowing industry to demonstrate the real-life impacts of a new product in the marketplace under a temporary set of rules and controlled by regulatory supervision. This will help the government decide whether to make permanent changes to how a product should be regulated. Colleagues, allow me to give you an example of how these sandboxes would work in practice. About a decade ago, an appliance manufacturer wanted to start selling heat pump clothes dryers in Canada, as they are a more efficient product than traditional dryers. While they were a completely new technology that we wanted in the country, they met the definition of a regular old clothes dryer. The issue was that to comply with the Act's regulations, they needed to be tested according to the prescribed test procedure for both a dryer and a heat pump. That procedure required that the dryer have an exhaust pipe, which is something that heat pump dryers do not have. So for a time, this innovative and highly efficient product could not simply comply with our regulations and could not be imported for sale on the Canadian market. If a regulatory sandbox had been available then, this appliance manufacturer could have applied to participate, and a new testing protocol would have been developed quickly. I know we have all encountered unintended consequences of regulations. In fact, I would encourage the government to expand the use of sandboxes in other regulated sectors. Just recently, I've met and assisted a BC-based company called Edison Motors, who are facing a regulatory hurdle in getting their modern technology built. I would like to thank my colleague, Senator Housakos, for connecting this excellent company with my office. They also happen to be a prime example of a company that a sandbox would directly benefit. In a nutshell, Edison Motors builds Canada's first heavy-duty electric hybrid trucks. The regulatory framework they are beholden to requires them to use a specific U.S.-certified and manufactured engine in their hybrid trucks, but there are no such engines that exist in Canada with an on-road certification. So this company wanted to buy their engines from Sweden to accommodate the novel technology of their trucks, but this European part does not meet Canadian regulations. In this context, the use of a sandbox would allow, the regulatory sandbox would allow this Canadian company to continue to innovate while demonstrating the benefit of updating the regulations to better support this new and emerging technology. Cette première série de modifications.
This first series of amendments also provides for the possibility of making minor changes more quickly by allowing the minister to amend the regulations directly, rather than going through the lengthy process of approval by the Governor in Council. This means that new energy-consuming products could be added to product categories more quickly. Finally, the regulations could refer to existing standards, guidelines, or technical documents, making it easier to update requirements as technology evolves, without having to rewrite or describe every technical detail in new regulations put in place by the minister. Colleagues, the second group of amendments proposed in Bill S-4 aims to modernize the application of the Act. Strict standards are only useful if they are enforced and applied. That's why the bill updates the amount of fines imposed by the courts, which were set when the Act was created in 1992. This update takes inflation into account, makes these penalties more serious, and aligns them with other federal laws and the recommendations of the Department of Justice, based on the seriousness of the offense. The bill also adds fines, known as administrative monetary penalties, which are a flexible, intermediate tool designed to encourage compliance and avoid the use of legal proceedings, so as not to burden our justice system. In addition, Bill S-4 adds new measures to quickly correct breaches by suppliers or commercial entities. For example, the minister may order a supplier or commercial entity to take corrective measures if they are found to be in violation of the Act. Finally, the bill clarifies the parameters for virtual inspections so that inspectors, whose job is to verify compliance or prevent non-compliance with the Act, are better equipped to perform their duties in an accessible manner. This measure will save time and reduce costs to manufacturers and the government.
This third group of amendments expands the Act's reach to be more responsive to modern-day consumer habits and industry operations. These amendments benefit consumers by changing the requirement for online sales, including the requirement for digital labels, to ensure accurate, meaningful information is available on a product's energy efficiency, whether a person opts to buy it in store or online. When you buy online currently, especially from retailers outside Canada and the United States, you may unknowingly end up with an inefficient product owing to a lack of accessible information. This could result in higher energy bills for years to come. The reason behind this is simple. It is harder to ensure Canadian energy efficiency standards are being met by foreign products. Imagine it is a heat wave during the summer and you are desperate for air conditioning. You browse on your usual retailer's website and you pick out an option, assuming that it's a reasonable choice, even though it doesn't have any energy labeling. When it is installed, however, you watch your energy bill skyrocket and you can barely afford to turn it on. This appliance didn't need to meet Canadian energy efficiency standards because you bought it from an online retailer. With the amendments in Bill S-4, you would be protected from this situation. The retailer would be required to only offer products meeting Canadian standards, and the expected energy use would be clearly labeled. Colleagues, with this act, Canadian shoppers will also be provided with energy consumption information online through virtual labeling, rather than the paper labels which they may never see. This enables Canadian consumers to have the full scope of the product's energy information ahead of finalizing the purchase, whether you buy online or in store. Another feature of this legislation is to close what is called the import for purpose use loophole. The amendments in Bill S-4 will remove cases where an apartment landlord, for example, can import less efficient furnaces, say if they were older or discontinued, then then install them in their tenants' suites. This would then in turn force occupants of these homes to pay more for heating going forward. Moreover, honourable senators, the bill also benefits consumers by introducing new types of energy efficiency standards that go further than just looking at how much energy is used, but would also have stipulations around what kind of energy and how products perform over their life cycle. The definition of energy efficiency standards is being broadened beyond performance standards so that a standard prescribed for an energy-using product or class of products may include modern methods to measure energy use. These new standards reflect the complexity and potential of modern technologies. Efficiency standards would now include requirements for interoperability. This function would allow smart devices to communicate with our electricity system and better support provinces and territories in managing our electricity demands. Current performance standards are limited to looking at energy in versus the task that it accomplishes. Bill S-4 proposes amendments to that standard so that standards can be developed based on factors such as the pieces or features that the equipment must have, how equipment must be able to connect with electrical systems, or regarding equipment durability. These expanded standards can enable greater energy efficiency improvements across entire product categories. As a practical example of these new standards, many utilities have demand response programs that control the temperature setting of air conditioners. Bill S-4's introduction of interoperability and demand standards is a significant step forward, providing the authorities that make it possible to introduce requirements for heating and cooling products to communicate with electricity grids. These new standards are stepping stones to the digitization of the electricity grid and mean more reliable and secure energy systems across Canada. Finally, colleagues, the fourth group of amendments enhances accountability under the Act. Canadians will continue to benefit from the regular, transparent, and accessible reports from the Minister to Parliament on the implementation of the Act, including comparing its standards to international standards. After an initial mandatory review and at the 10-year mark, there will also subsequently be regular mandatory reviews of the Energy Efficiency Act every 5 years to maintain Canada's status as a leader on the global stage when it comes to energy efficiency. As we can all appreciate, it is important to provide some time for everyone to become aware of these changes so they can adapt accordingly. Bill S-4 includes a 6-month transitional provision for dealers and sellers to adjust. It also provides the requisite time for the department to do outreach with stakeholders across Canada and beyond. Colleagues, before I conclude my remarks, I would like to provide information about the timelines for the implementation of this Act. Key elements of this bill, including the updated fines regime and the parameters for virtual inspections, will come into force upon royal assent. Other changes will require new regulations, policy frameworks, and processes to be developed. These would necessitate discussions with the affected stakeholders who would be actively involved in that process. These such amendments include the new energy efficiency standards, online sales, and for online sales originating outside of Canada, digital labels, and the administrative monetary penalties or tickets. Honourable Senators, through Bill S-4, we are empowering our country to be better prepared to thrive with the technological advancements we have seen over the last 30 years, as well as those inevitably to come in the decades ahead. The Energy Efficiency Act, as we know it, was created in a bygone era. As I've highlighted, it has served us well and has saved Canadians a lot of money by insisting that appliances and equipment use less energy. However, in the interest of Canada's continued evolution, the legacy of yesterday must be a stepping stone to continued progress. Bill S-4 is Canada's answer to a world that is more connected, more digital, and more urgent in its call for energy security, climate action, and economic leadership. At its heart, this modernization is about ensuring that every Canadian, no matter their province or territory, their means, or how they shop, can access the best and most efficient technologies. By modernizing requirements around online sales, we would ensure that inefficient products being sold online would meet the same standards as those products sold in stores. Digital labeling means Canadians, wherever they live, could go online to learn about the energy consumption of the products they are buying, whether it is during an online purchase or in a retail storefront. For renters and people who don't choose their own appliances or heating systems, stronger standards mean all Canadians will benefit from the energy savings attributed to more efficient equipment. For businesses, revised standards mean that they too will reap the benefit from savings that come with highly efficient equipment installed in their buildings. And for industry, the efficient equipment used in industrial processes, such as motors, pumps, and compressors, will continue to improve their bottom line. It is about building a marketplace and a country that rewards innovation and ambition. It is about giving our inventors and entrepreneurs and our workers the tools and space to be leaders. In closing, colleagues, I ask that all senators join me in supporting Bill S-4. Megwich, merci, thank you.
Senator Batters, you have a question?
Senator Wilson, take a couple of questions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator Batters.
Thank you. Senator Wilson, as I quickly flip through the many pages of this Bill S-4 amending the Energy Efficiency Act, I wondered when I turned to some of these pages, why are there so many, why is the federal government putting so many draconian measures in this seemingly innocuous bill? Because there are sections in here that expand powers for warrantless searches and inspections, powers requiring forfeiture, dramatically increasing a federal minister's powers to, quote, undertake any projects, programs, and activities that, in the minister's opinion, advance the purposes of promoting energy, efficiency, etc., and wide powers to disclose personal information. What is the need for these types of widely expanded powers in this bill?
Senator Wilson.
Thank you for the question. The specific ministerial authorities for exemptions to regulations are the regulatory sandbox and the quick response tool. These tools provide critical flexibility to respond to emerging opportunities in unforeseen circumstances, but are constrained to very specific situations. They have to be available equally to all companies and are accompanied by stringent guardrails to prevent widespread use. The Minister has the unique position of understanding, developing, and presenting energy efficiency regulations. The Minister is also supported by technical expertise and close relationships with stakeholders. Regulatory exemptions due to unforeseen circumstances require cohesive relationships with stakeholders. Stakeholders leverage close relationships with the Minister to flag when compliance to a regulation seems impossible. Enabling these flexibilities allows the Minister to be responsive to these challenges where warranted and allows companies who have these products to be able to innovate.
Senator Batters, supplementary.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll delve into that more when we look at this bill in more detail at committee to see which of those priorities of the government are actually required for these sections. But another part I wanted to talk about is, in your remarks, you mentioned what you called flexible intermediate fines by the minister to avoid the use of judicial proceedings. But what that also does is avoids due process and the protection of courts. And this act actually includes first of all, some major new offenses with potential quasi-criminal offenses with potential massive new fines listed from $250,000 for a first offense for some of these fines as a possibility, up to $5 million. And then those flexible intermediate fines by the minister that you were talking about, those are the administrative monetary penalties section, and that provides some major powers to the minister to give individuals the ability to issue notices of violation with fines and also taking away rights of appeal. And instead, the minister would be the one to review it, and also taking away the defenses of due diligence and reasonable belief. What types of examples would you give as to why these types of powers, both the major quasi-new criminal offenses would be required with those huge fines, and also these administrative monetary penalties?
Senator Wilson.
Thank you for the question. As I said in my speech, which you heard, this act is more than 30 years old. And the fines and the regime that have been in place for those 30 years have not been updated. So the proposed fine levels are consistent with other government departments and have been reviewed by the Department of Justice. So that's in terms of the bigger fines. In terms of the administrative monetary penalties, tickets, there are times when companies will not be in compliance, and maybe a simple request to have them correct their action is all that's required. But there will also be times when companies are not in compliance and they're continuing not to be in compliance, but not in such a manner that makes it warranted to pursue the more serious, larger fines. Those are situations where the minister would then have the tool, or the department would then have the tool to issue tickets or administrative monetary penalties. It's to create a little bit more flexibility so that we make sure that people are fulfilling the rules, but not having to load up our justice system with unnecessary litigation and fines.
Senator Batters.
With respect to those major quasi-criminal offenses and those large fines, could you please give a couple of examples of the types of things that a $5 million fine would be appropriate to levy for? I'm just really trying to figure out what sort of egregious example would dictate that sort of a fine. And also on the administrative monetary penalties part, why take away the ability to have a due diligence defense or a reasonable belief defense if you're just really trying to correct behavior?
Senator Wilson.
That's an excellent question, and I don't know, honourable colleague, what would trigger a $5 million fine. They're intended to be incremental and tied to the magnitude of the offence. So what a $5 million offence is versus a smaller offence, I can't tell you. But the whole concept is to create a gradation of different levels of enforcement. So just redirection, then if that's not working, you have administrative monetary penalties, and then if that's not working, you have fines. I'm assuming that by the time we get to $5 million, it's very serious. What I will do is I will take that question away, and I will get back to you and other members of this chamber with an answer in terms of what would justify a fine at the higher level.
Senator Batters.
Last question, then, if you could also please inquire as to why they would take away the due diligence defenses and reasonable belief defenses as well.
Senator Wilson.
I will do that.